Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it's a Wednesday, April 22nd, in the third week of Easter. Great to be with you on Wednesday and every day, Monday through Friday, here at EWTN's Catholic Connection, and that is Earth Day, and that is going to tie in, believe it or not, to our Italy's Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. I'll explain. We also have the wonderful Kimberly Bird. She's a senior specialist of communications at the amazing Live Action organization. They're going to be checking in with us once a month and giving us an update on what's happening. We're going to be looking at a recent report from the Department of Justice and information about Planned Parenthood, and how they worked with the Justice Department in the previous administration, to track pro-lifers and to also really do some horrible things. You remember the story of the Mike Houck, I think it was named the Houck family, and the agents that just stormed his home early in the morning and, just frightened all the children, and he ended up being arrested. And of course, he was found innocent of any charges. It was just something that you would see in a third world country. But the focus of some of these leaders who were so anti-life and working with these very strong pro-abortion organizations seems unreal. Again, it seems like something out of a third world country or maybe a Hollywood movie. So we'll talk about that with Kimberly Bird. And then for Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, it is Earth Day today. So I thought I would share another episode of The Unknown St. Francis, our Learn series, our free video online Learn series, which I hope you can access, and you will if you are interested in St. Francis. I'm sure it's very easy. Again, it's free. It's simply EWTN.com/St. Francis. It's beautifully filmed in 3 areas of Italy. We shot it last year, and of course it is there for you now as a study, a personal study, a group study, maybe a parish study. We have a free downloadable guide, and you have reflection questions. So again, it's a perfect short study for you, and we kept the videos short. I don't think there's anyone that's more than 6 minutes long. So I think you'll really enjoy it. And my prayer is that you will think about St. Francis differently after you watch this series. That's why we call it The Unknown St. Francis. So just take a look at that, and you go to EWTN.com/St. Francis. And then Joan Lewis, of course, will be joining us from Rome, and she is a busy lady. She's going to a number of different events, and of course, at the same time, watching all the activities with the Holy Father as he wraps up his trip in Africa, which will end tomorrow. That's the first hour of the program. In the second hour, we have Lauren Muzyka, speaking of life issues. She's going to be with us for 2 segments. I love her organization. She's the CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, and she is going to be talking about how many babies they've saved in the past 12 years. It's an anniversary for them, and they have a lot of celebrating to do, and we should celebrate right along with them. So that is the show. Kimberly Bird, Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. Joan Lewis, hour number 2. Sidewalk Advocates for Life, a very special anniversary. Let's take a look at the forecast for you on a Thursday morning. Nothing too major, but they are going to see in certain parts of the country, especially in the plains and even in parts of California, they're going to see more, possibly Northern California, some snow, and actually some critical fire weather conditions. A Pacific storm system continuing to bring low elevation rain and mountain snow to much of the west, and that'll happen through today. Heavy mountain snow is expected in the higher elevation areas of the Sierra Nevada, and the system will also bring strong winds to the Intermountain West, the Rockies, and the Plains, and that's creating, as we mentioned, critical fire weather conditions for the high plains. That is our rundown in the weather for a Wednesday morning. It is April 22nd, 2026. Now it's time for the news here on EWTN at 4 minutes past the hour. President Trump now saying he is extending the ceasefire with Iran. In a Truth Social post, the president citing the seriously fractured Iranian government. The president says Iran made the request, adding the U.S. will hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. The president says a U.S. naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz will continue. The current ceasefire was due to expire today. Vice President J.D. Vance was set to travel to Pakistan to meet with Iranian officials. It's unclear when or if Vance will be departing. Meanwhile, Iran cannot get their hands on nuclear weapons. Those words from Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott. He says if Iran gets what they want in nuclear weapons, Iran will be able to reach our shores.
I do believe that what Trump is doing is our best shot, and it's our only shot at preserving American life.
Vice President J.D. Vance again has been expected to attend a new round of talks in Pakistan to end the war, but the late word is that he has delayed his trip to attend meetings at the White House. This as there's no word on whether anyone in Iran will show up for the talks in Pakistan. And it's a very busy day for the Pope as his Africa trip draws to a close. He is spending his second day in Equatorial Guinea, where during a speech yesterday he warned humanity's future is at risk of being tragically compromised. He cited ongoing wars and a breakdown of international law. Today, meanwhile, the Holy Father is celebrating Mass at the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in the province of Mongomo. His agenda will include flights to the port city of Bata, where he will visit a prison there. Then the Holy Father, seems like it went by so quickly, will be heading back to Rome tomorrow night, and Joan will have more on his journey through Africa. She joins us, of course, at 39 minutes past the hour. A federal appeals court is upholding a Texas law that requires public schools to display the Ten Commandments. The legislature passed Senate Bill 10 in 2025, mandating every public elementary and secondary classroom post a copy of the commandments. A lawsuit, meanwhile, argued the law violates the First Amendment, but in its ruling yesterday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said the law does not violate the amendment because it does not punish anyone who rejects the Ten Commandments, regardless of the reason. And the Department of Justice is accusing the Southern Poverty Law Center of funneling money to leaders of hate groups. In a fraud indictment returned yesterday, the DOJ alleging the organization paying millions to people associated with the KKK, the National Socialist Party of America, and Aryan Nations affiliated motorcycle club, as well as other extremist groups.
They're required to, under the laws associated with a nonprofit, to have certain transparency and honesty in what they're telling donors they're going to spend money on and what their mission statement is and what they're raising money doing.
Acting U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche discussing the indictment during a press conference yesterday.
As the indictment describes, the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
Meanwhile, the SPLC announcing it was the subject of a DOJ criminal probe. They claim they were paying informants to gather information on extremist groups. President Trump reading an excerpt from the Bible yesterday as part of a national scripture reading. The group Christians Engage asking the president to take part in the America Reads the Bible event.
And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place to myself for a house of sacrifice.
Trump recording his segment from the Oval Office, reading from 2 Chronicles chapter 7.
If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land.
Several past and present Trump administration officials are also taking part in the reading this week. Tammy Trujillo tells us there's an update now on a mix-up at a fertility clinic that left a Florida couple with the wrong child.
Tiffany Score and her partner Stephen Mills are white, but Tiffany wound up giving birth 2 years ago to a child of a different race after an IVF treatment at the Fertility Center of Orlando. The couple has announced that the biological parents of that little girl have now been identified. While they say the bond they have with the baby they've named Shay is forever, they admit this development, quote, raises new issues that will have to be resolved. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Voters in Virginia have approved a redistricting referendum that would allow Democrats to redraw the state's congressional maps. That measure could give Democrats a 10-1 advantage in the upcoming midterms. Now, following the results of yesterday's vote, the former Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, is urging the Virginia Supreme Court to step in and rule against what he called an unconstitutional process that will disenfranchise millions of residents of Virginia. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is ending mandatory flu vaccine requirements for service members.
Under President Trump, the War Department continues to take decisive action to once again restore freedom and strength to our joint force. We're seizing this moment to discard any absurd, overreaching mandates that only weaken our warfighting capabilities.
This policy change aligning with the Trump administration's efforts to reverse COVID-19 vaccine mandates and reinstate service members who were discharged for refusing them. Philadelphia police say 2 men with assault rifles robbed an armored truck yesterday morning.
Someone just robbed a Brinks truck.
They allegedly stole more than $1 million. Shortly before 9:45 in the morning, police say 2 gunmen jumped out of a parked car, armed with assault rifles, and attacked the truck.
Aaron McLaughlin reporting investigators say they later found the suspected getaway vehicle abandoned under Interstate 95, but no arrests have been made yet, and no description of the suspect has been released. No injuries were reported. The FBI has now taken over that investigation. And after a teenager died by suicide following chatbot use, California lawmakers are now introducing not 1 but 2 measures to make chatbots safer for children. Companion chatbots are computer programs that talk with users for fun or emotional support.
This technology is relatively new, but both anecdotal and scholarly evidence continues to show that the impacts of these interactions between chatbots and users, particularly youth, can be extremely dangerous.
That's Senator Alex Padilla, who says researchers have found that high daily usage correlates with loneliness, problematic use, isolation, and lower socialization. The chatbots have also been seen to have addictive properties. The proposed laws would require chatbot companies to review their products each year to find risks to minors and have their safety measures checked by independent auditors. Reports would then go to the state's attorney general, and public prosecutors could then take legal action if companies don't follow the rules. The new legislation would also require chatbots to refer children to crisis support if needed, and also alert parents as quickly as possible. Lawmakers introducing the changes after a family said a chatbot discouraged their son from talking to his parents and even offered to write him a suicide note. He died by suicide soon after. And you probably spent more in March than you did the month before, but Daria Abinger says most of it went to one place.
Retail sales jumped more than expected last month, with much of the increase going right into people's gas tanks. The Census Bureau, which tabulates the data, shows they rose 1.7% in March, which is more than the 1.4% that analysts were expecting. The jump driven by a 15.5% spike in gasoline spending brought on by the war with Iran. I'm Daria Albinger.
And a new study says drinking coffee can lower your risk of dementia. Researchers at Harvard University analyzing 43 years of information on over 130,000 people who were questioned and found that higher consumption of caffeinated coffee was linked to an 18% lower risk of dementia and better cognitive performance. Similar benefits were found among caffeinated tea drinkers, but not among decaf drinkers. The study suggests there are benefits related to caffeine, though the researchers say it's unclear whether that was the only factor. It is a Wednesday morning. Great to be with you on a Wednesday and every day here at EWTN's Catholic Connection, April 22nd in the 3rd week of Easter. We are your pro-life radio network, and we'll find out more about that coming up next with our friends from Live Action. Stay tuned. And again, just want to remind you, also coming up this morning at the bottom of the hour, we have a special Italy's Shrines and Wonders on this Earth Day, and we're going to talk about St. Francis and the Wolf of Gubbio. And there was a very special reason that St. Francis paid so much attention to animals and creation. We'll explain at the bottom of the hour. And then, of course, Joan Lewis takes us home up to 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Joan's Rome. We'll be right back. Minutes past the hour. It's a Wednesday morning. It's April 22nd in the 3rd week of Easter. We are your pro-life radio, TV, online network. We cover all things life and stand up for life every single day. It was a big, big commitment started by our foundress, Mother Angelica, of course. Kimberly Bird is with us. She joins us once a month for an update from the wonderful Live Action. She's a senior specialist of communications. And Kimberly, happy Easter to you. Great to speak with you. There's a couple of big stories that are out there. Let's start first. I want to talk about the Department of Justice. I mentioned that at top of the hour, targeting pro-lifers under the previous administration. That's been released recently. But even more recently, Planned Parenthood's annual report. What say you, my dear? What's the latest with that?
Well, basically what we're seeing, Teresa, is that it means more abortions and more taxpayer dollars. So this report covers their fiscal year, which is June 2024 to June of 25. So this is before the defund, one-year defund was put into place in July of last year. So what we're seeing is an increase of abortions and an increased use of taxpayer funds. Almost 500,000 abortions by Planned Parenthood last year, using over $830 million in taxpayer funds.
Oh my gosh. But how do we get this beyond radio shows such as this, radio networks such as this, organizations such as yours? Because people need to hear this, which is frustrating to me because we know this, people who listen to us and other conservative outlets, but it has to get out to the general public because I still don't think most people have any idea how bad it is.
Many polls are saying that even those individuals, those Americans that are pro-choice or just apathetic to the issue, do not want their money going to Planned Parenthood. And what's incredible too is that their services are down when it comes to services that they're saying they need the taxpayer funds for, like Medicaid, and their cancer screenings are down. Their STI testings are down. Their mammograms services are down. So
they don't do mammograms, though. They do referrals. That's the other thing that's misinformation. They say they do mammograms, but when you call a Planned Parenthood facility, they'll say, well, come in, we'll give you a recommendation, where you can go. But they don't actually do them because they don't spend the money on it. Everything is geared toward killing children.
It's all geared towards abortion and their new revenue generator, which is providing trans-sex hormones to minors. So they are just, they're steeped in evil doings. And it is very important that we continue to get this out. So I really appreciate your show and being able to speak out on this issue. But yes, we do need to continue to educate beyond just the circle or the pro-life advocates or Catholics. We have to talk to the media. It's very important that we begin to share these information, these statistics with the media beyond just our inner circle.
What has been your experience, Kimberly, when you evangelize in your work, when you and Lila Rose run across people who, don't believe in abortion through all 9 months, and maybe they're on the fence about the issue, and you tell them some of these statistics of Planned Parenthood? What's their response?
Well, I think the biggest response is shock. I think a lot of people haven't taken the time to really consider the issue. We not only share the truth about the abortion procedures and the pain, physical, mental, and emotional pain that it causes the mother and the father, lifelong regret. We also share just the humanity of the child in the womb, and we find that people are much more understanding and against abortion when they understand that this child, regardless of how many weeks, that's arbitrary, right? We believe life begins at conception, and when we can share the scientific knowledge of the humanity of the child developing in the womb, that helps to move the needle as well.
I just was telling you during the break, a friend of mine with one of our affiliates, producer friend of mine, Andrew, sent me this story this morning. And I know this just sends me, it just gets me so upset, gets my Italian up. New study confirms lobsters feel pain, driving scientists to call for a ban on boiling them alive. A new study adds to the growing body of evidence that lobsters feel pain, with the crustaceans seemingly responding to electrical shocks with emotional distress. Okay, so if you want to stop this, maybe this is something that you want to support, but then how can you have this study out there and then not connect the dots and think about the child in the womb?
The innocent child in the womb. I encourage your listeners and everyone to go to whatisabortion.com. And these are videos that we put together alongside former abortionists who are now pro-life advocates. And they share the science and the medical procedures, the various medical procedures of abortion, because there are different procedures. And they're incredible to see the brutality that happens inside the womb to an innocent human being. And, there are questions on, how many weeks until they feel pain. I don't think that should matter. This is an innocent human being with human dignity, human rights, created in the image of and likeness of God, and they are being pulled apart piece by piece. And it is horrific. And here we are considering whether or not we should care about emotional distress in lobsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If you think early on, right, in the early days of the pro-life movement, after Dr. Bernard Nathanson had his conversion, and he put out the movie Silent Scream. Remember that?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can see the reaction of the baby in the womb. You know, we work very closely with And Then There Were None and Pro Love by Abby Johnson. And if your listeners have seen her movie, it is it's incredible, because that is what changed her mind as well, as seeing the ultrasound of a baby being aborted. And so, really talking to those former Planned Parenthood workers and their horrific stories can also really open your eyes to what actually happens behind these closed doors.
Speaking with Kimberly Bird, Senior Specialist of Communications at Live Action, we do a monthly update with this wonderful pro-life organization founded by the amazing Lila Rose. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to give you a chance to react to this report that came out from the Department of Justice and the way pro-lifers were harassed, they were charged in some cases, and really just they were followed for years and investigated as well.
Absolutely. So just last week, an 800-page report came out, and it reviewed over 700,000 records that showed how the Biden administration weaponized the FACE Act, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. And it went specifically against pro-life Americans who were peacefully praying in front of abortion clinics. These individuals were elderly, they had young children, and they were all given they imposed significantly harsher sentences on them. And so it's important now that the Trump administration takes corrective actions. I hope that they are held accountable. But, we all knew that this was happening, and we did what we could to try to, go up against it. But wow, I mean, I can't believe they were able to persecute pro-life and Christian Americans the way that they did.
It sounds like something out of either, I was saying this to introduce the segment, a third world country, or let's say, something that you would, like a Hollywood movie. I mean, or one of those special action films or something, right? Right?
Yeah, they tracked the travel, the speech, the protest activity, the personal information, specifically of pro-life Americans. Mm-hmm. And they were engaged, pro-life Americans were, protected under the Constitution, but unfortunately, the DOJ, at the time, did not see it that way. So we are glad that this report has come out, and it should alarm every American that a government can do that.
This is another story that we can share with people just from a factual perspective, Kimberly, to let them know what's happening and how the abortion industry is so continually interested in not only silencing pro-lifers, but causing them great harm.
Absolutely, yes. And the report did show that that the Biden administration collaborated very closely with organizations like Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Federation in order to monitor and track these pro-life activists. So it's very scary to think what was happening, and glad that it is not anymore. But it is something that we need to keep our eyes out for.
You think about the effort that was put into this, and you think about, groups such as Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Federation. What do? Pick up the phone every day or have a Zoom call and see how they were doing in going after pro-life? I mean, think about that.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. So these are the people that they decide to go after. I mean, it would be one thing, God forbid, if they were committing crimes and bombing abortion facilities, but that wasn't the case. They were peaceful pro-lifers. Well, don't get me started, Kimberly. You got me all fired up now.
Thank you so much for having me, Teresa.
All right, you're amazing. Tell Lila we said hello. Liveaction.org. Kimberly Bird is their Senior Specialist of Communications. She joins us once a month for a pro-life update. We'll be right back. Shrines and Wonders Wednesday coming up next. 28 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. You know that music, our bumper music, means it's time for Italy's Shrines and Wonders Wednesdays, based on my best-selling book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, published by our friends at EWTN Publishing. Volume 2 coming out very soon, dedicated to the one, the only St. Francis of Assisi, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, discovering sacred spaces and fascinating places in the life of St. Francis. That'll come out again in a few weeks, probably I think late May, early June. Don't have an exact date yet, but you can pre-order it on our religious catalog, of course, and also on Amazon. So what does St. Francis have to do with today and Earth Day? Do tell. Well, I will. Earth Day is celebrated today, celebrated every year actually. It's a global event dedicated to raising awareness about environmental protection and sustainability. It was first celebrated all the way back in 1970 when activists such as San Francisco's John McConnell and Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson organized grassroots demonstrations to address issues such as air and water pollution, pesticide use, and environmental degradation, drawing over 20 million participants in the United States alone. This is a worldwide event, and it's very nice to celebrate Earth Day. And the church has a lot of teachings which are important on protecting the environment and our involvement in that. Now, when it comes to St. Francis of Assisi and Italy, he is often associated with Earth Day as well because, of course, we know that he loved creation. But all too often, and we say this in our series that I mentioned earlier, and I say this in the new book, and the series, by the way, once again, if you haven't watched it yet, it's free, and you can download it at EWTN.com/St. Francis. Again, EWTN.com/St. Francis. And St. Francis did indeed love creation for the main reason because it reflected God. And so when you think about him preaching to the birds, and in the book I walk you through 3 different sites outside of Assisi dedicated to Francis preaching to the birds and what he told them. He actually said to them, among other things, go fill the earth with song, which I think, or the sky with song, which I think is so beautiful. And there's so much about him and his treatment of animals and creations, and we just look at the way he wrote and what he said in the Canticle of the Creatures, or the Canticle of the Sun, and his love for nature. But why did he love nature so much? Animals, brother sun, sister moon, brother wolf, because everything reflected the glory of God. And that's what some people get wrong, as Doug Keck and I have mentioned many times on this program. Oftentimes we put him in a box and see him as this holy, yes, a holy man, but some sort of a, 13th century environmentalist and a hippie. Yes, he loved creation because, again, to him it was a way to get people to appreciate and recognize God. That's why I was really taken with the story of the Wolf of Gubbio. And one of the segments, the one that we're going to air for you this morning, we went to the beautiful, one of my favorite towns in all of Umbria, the town of Gubbio. And there is a story about Francis taming the ferocious Wolf of Gubbio. And you'll hear in this report about something very eye-opening and interesting that they discovered, and a church was built over this spot. We opened the segment. I'm just going to give you, this is radio, theater of the mind, so you're going to be hearing me talking about where I am, so I'll describe it to you. San Francesco della Pace, St. Francis of the Peace, is a little tiny church in the heart of Gubbio, and we were down below in a little crypt, and they have a large stuffed wolf to kind of give you the whole impression of what they're talking about. But there's a tomb there, and I'm going to let the piece, this particular segment that we're playing, explain why the tomb is so significant and how we know St. Francis loved all of God's creatures because they were God's creatures, and again, we're able to help him and hopefully all of us remember the glory and the creativity of our great God. Take a listen. Being that St. Francis is not only a patron of Italy, but patron of the animals, the ecology, and the environment, you might not be too surprised that I'm standing in front of this very large but beautiful creature, a wolf. But how much do you know about the beautiful story of the taming of the ferocious Wolf of Gubbio and St. Francis of Assisi? We're actually standing in a beautiful little church in the medieval town of Gubbio, about 45 minutes north of Assisi, where it's said that the bones of the Wolf of Gubbio are actually buried in a special tomb. So what is the true story, the lesser-known story of the Wolf of Gubbio and St. Francis of Assisi? Well, in St. Francis's time, the town of Gubbio, as we mentioned, about 45 minutes north, was struggling with this ferocious animal that was not only eating the farm animals and terrorizing terrorizing the people, even attacking humans now and then. But it made them very, very upset. And so Francis wanted to come and see if he could help and investigate. And so he made his way up here, walked all the way here to Gubbio, speaks with the townspeople, and then goes outside the city walls to encounter this ferocious wolf. Now, apparently, according to the stories that have been passed on century after century, many townspeople came with him, behind him, and they were very frightened because they thought the wolf would have his next victim in St. Francis. However, when the wolf comes out of the forest, he looks at St. Francis as if he's going to attack, but St. Francis calmly, as the legend says, raises his hand and makes a sign of the cross over the wolf, and the wolf submits and goes to the ground. The rest of the story goes something like this. Francis has a conversation, although somewhat one-sided, with the wolf, telling him, Brother Wolf, if you want to live peacefully, if you want to be fed by the people, you have to basically, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, stop eating the people and they'll feed you. And so after that encounter with St. Francis, the wolf lived for about 2 years. And he would go around the town and the people took very good care of him. And so it's a beautiful story of redemption, a symbol of peace and a cooperation with nature. You can believe it to be legend or you can believe it to be true. If you talk to the people in this area, they say it actually happened. And it's interesting that the story not only survived after 800 years, but that there's a church dedicated to that encounter between the Wolf of Gubbio and St. Francis. Here in St. Francis della Pace, San Francesco of the Peace, the wolf, as I said earlier, is said to be buried. Now, what's interesting is there is a tomb, and on top of the tomb, as you can see, there's an image of an animal. To this day, this is the only tomb of a canine inside a church. So again, legend or a real slice of life. You can decide. At the end of the day, though, it's not too hard to understand that this could very well be true, given the saints' love of all of God's creatures, whether they be large or small, whether it be the trees in the forest or the birds in the sky. St. Francis gives us a great example of how to love not only humanity, but all, again, of God's amazing creation. As we close, here are some questions for you. So there you go. Brother Sun, Sister Moon, Brother Fire, Sister Water, reflecting, and even Brother Wolf, reflecting the saints' theology of universal kinship and respect for all creatures because they reflect the glory of God. This week's edition of Shrines and Wonders, check out the series, EWTN.com/St. Francis. Joan and I just chatting during the break about some of our favorite images so far from the Holy Father's amazing visit to different parts of Africa, including the little girl who ran up to him and hugged him. And she was telling me about, I didn't see that scene, Joni, of a little boy that was running along the Pope Mobile. Tell us about that one.
Oh, that was absolutely amazing. I think it was the EWTN people that caught it, or it might have been even from the Vatican feed, because it looked like it was being filmed from the Pope Mobile. And so you see the crowd lining up across the street. I think this was still in Angola. The crowd's lining up across the street or wherever the Pope Mobile is at that moment. And behind the 3 or 4 or 5 people deep crowd is this kid. He's probably like 9 years old, running like the wind. Aww. Trying to get, to like where the Holy Father's gonna, the car will turn so he can greet him. But Holy Father had some really special moments with babies, with young children, with teenagers. So, he's just, it's a trip that made him smile. Not made him. He smiles quite easily. I think we've learned that about Pope Leo. But no, it was just an amazing. So he's in his 4th country, and he returns tomorrow, and from Equatorial Guinea. And interestingly enough, I was thinking on my way home from this film I'll be telling you about, the Pope arriving tomorrow and coming back. And you know what I loved when I worked at the Vatican? When John Paul would come back from really long trips like this one, those of us who worked for the Roman Curia, we were always able to welcome him home. We'd be told that, after his plane land, such and such a time, he would be in the San Damaso courtyard. He would be brought back, from the plane or helicopters, it might have been, to the courtyard. And he got out of the car and greeted every single one of us. And, wow. I felt so privileged. How could I not be there to greet the Pope, welcome home, Holy Father. So he's the only one that ever did that. And I'm sure there were times when he was so tired he could have, slept on the cobblestones. But in any event, he always was welcoming. So I'm sure the Pope will be welcomed by somebody, but not by all of us, tomorrow. So
I wonder if he'll head back to, will he go back to Castle Gandolfo maybe for a little break tomorrow night when he gets in?
That's what I would think, sure. Because I haven't seen I haven't looked for his schedule for the next couple of days, but I think anybody who works for the Pope or the Pope himself, when they're smart, after a trip like this, you're not going to schedule an early morning, meeting with guests on Friday. So Friday, I know that he often does receive, ranking officials of the Vatican, heads of various dicasteries. But the thing that would make common sense would be tomorrow to go directly to Castel Gandolfo, spend Friday there, and then, come back Friday night for anything he might have on the agenda.
No, I think he should take the whole weekend off, except for Sunday.
Actually, that would be very smart.
Let him relax. He's been traveling for 2 weeks, for goodness sake.
And, this trip was planned so long ago that I'm sure they looked at his schedule and say, knowing full well that he loves Castel Gandolfo, hey, Holy Father, why don't you spend a couple days, because we know you work, probably in addition to playing tennis, and maybe he even rides that beautiful stallion, I don't know, but just that a change of pace that isn't every day, and let you kind of, sleep an hour longer than usual, or go to bed an hour earlier, whichever.
Well, it's a well-deserved break. I know he'll take a little bit of a break, but I don't think he'll take the whole weekend. I don't know if he's listening to us right now, but if he is, I think he's deserving of a long weekend. But I know you had a very busy morning already and wanted to tell us about an amazing film you watched. Tell us about it.
This was totally amazing. It's a film, and I will put a link to how people can see this online. It's the life of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the 20th century French Jesuit priest and scientist, etc. There was no field of science that he was not an expert in or have a degree in. But Mary and Frank Frost have been in the movie industry. It turns out Frank and I are the same age. He's been a producer for movies and produced this documentary on the life of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And Frank has been in Cygnus for many, many years in America. I'll be talking about his biography. That's not the most important thing right now. But Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, I said to him to Frank after the movie, I said, at this point, and knowing that he and I are both the same age, I said, at this point, I wish I had been born a couple of years earlier. At some point in my life, I might have met Teilhard de Chardin. He was born in France, lived in France, was sent to a Jesuit school there, fell in love with the Jesuits. He decided to become one. And being a Jesuit was both the good and the bad parts of his life, because he at a certain point began to do research in particular on evolution. And so he was kind of embracing this concept of, cosmic evolution. And he received a lot of opposition from the church, from his superiors at the Jesuit order. And his views on evolution made his superiors say to him, yes, you can write, yes, you can publish things, yes, you can give talks, but we want you to limit yourself to science. I mean, the man was a paleontologist, he was a botanist, he was a chemist. He just had an amazing field of love. He loved nature. Everything he could see or touch or have a hand in, he wanted to be part of. And so he explored every single thing, whether it was a flower or an animal or a continent. He explored it to the depths of his physical and mental energy, and was a prolific writer as well. But he worked in World War I. Priests did not go because he was French. The French priests were allowed to go, but not as priests. And he became a stretcher bearer in World War I. And throughout his life, he received some of the highest awards, of course, the the French Order of Merit that they ever had. He wrote books like The Human Phenomenon, a number of other books that he was called to task for by the head of the Jesuit order. And it's so interesting because I spent several hours yesterday researching Teilhard de Chardin, knowing I was going to be at the movie today, and that also Frank and Mary would be there because I want to interview them for my radio show. And in all the research, I was just stunned by the depth and breadth of this man's knowledge and learning, and I couldn't wait to see the film, and then I was blown away by the film. And as I said, I told Frank, I just wish I had maybe been born earlier, and my path might have crossed his sometime. Well, he lived many, many years in China. He was the man who found what is known as the Peking Man, the first I've forgotten the era now, skull of a human being. And his research, anything in science, was absolutely totally impeccable.
You know what it reminds me of? He's a Jesuit, right? Reminds me of Father Robert Spitzer in terms of the intelligence, right?
Would the two of them have loved to spend some time together?
Could you imagine? And throw Father Mitch Pacwa in there, too. Get the three of them to sit around and talk.
Oh, yes, exactly. In fact, I've been thinking of Mitch these days just because of the depth and breadth of his knowledge and languages, and just there's nothing that Father Mitch doesn't seem to love or want to know more about if he doesn't know enough. But, of course, the Gregorian University, where we saw this today, it's a Jesuit-run university. And Father Mark Lewis, who is the rector, we are not related, but he was one of the first persons I saw when I went in the room. And so, I said, oh, my gosh, I was doing all this research last night about Teilhard de Chardin, before seeing the film. And I said, Father, I have to tell you, at the very end, knowing the problems he had with the order, knowing that Father Lewis is Jesuit, at the very end of my research, I said, wow, I wonder where he stands in the church today. And Father Mark looked at me and he said, what did you discover? And I said, discovered that in many places he's been rehabilitated, and a lot of the doubts that the people had, in the 40s, in the 50s, even at the beginning of the 60s, people have been able to do more research and commend certain parts of his writing, of the parts that, involved religion and everything. But I have to tell you, one of the cute things today was when you went into the grade, you had to tell them your name. There was a specific list of students, professors, guests being allowed in. And we were in the Aula Romana. That's the biggest room where anything like today's movie or big lectures, famous guests would take place. And so Father Mark said, I have to tell you, he said, today the only time to show this movie to get the greatest number of people to come, he said, was like 12:30, but that's the lunch hour, the beginning of the lunch hour at the Greg. So they gave us lunch. We had picnic lunches.
Oh, how sweet. Yeah.
Oh, I know. So we sat there. Now, did I want vegetables or did I want meat? And so we just sat there at the beginning of the movie and consumed our picnic lunch, and all was well. But I'm very excited about the producers. I'm going to give them a little bit of space, these days in my writing. I'll be in the U.S. next week, and one of the things I'll be doing is getting a new laptop so that I can write and use the letter E. But,
that's been a challenge for you, I know, the last couple of weeks. So it's interesting it's so funny when you are coming over to the United States, we seem to be crossing in the air all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, how often it happens. So,
right.
But no, it'll be fun. I told Frank and Mary today, I said, I did a lot of research on the two of you and on the film, and now I've seen the film. But I said, it's depth. Breadth and depth is so great. I said, interviewing you, I want to do you and the film honor. I don't want to just do something superficial. So I'm going to study my notes. I'm going to, look at anything I wrote down or during the film pictures I took. It just merits that kind of attention. It's not a film you just want to spend 6 or 7 minutes words on and then tell people go and see it.
You know, it's interesting you should be talking about this today. Today is Earth Day, and it reminds me, I did a segment just a few minutes ago in Trines and Wonders on St. Francis and how people, you know, sometimes put him in a box. And yes, he loved the environment and creation, all of creation, but he did that because of his love of God. And then we see someone like this priest you're mentioning, and then you have, of course, Father Spitzer, Father Mitch. Everything that they do, their intelligence is applied to help people understand the greatness and the glory and the detail and the infinite love of God. I think it's amazing.
Well, then I have to close with these words of Pierre de Chardin. Someday, when men have conquered the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we will harness for God the energies of love. And then, for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire.
Wow.
I know. I think I read it 3 times in a row.
Wow. Can you read that again before we wrap up? One more time, please.
Yes.
That was beautiful.
Someday, when men have conquered the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we will harness for God the energies of love. And then, for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire.
Wow.
I know.
Amazing.
Well, he believed truly that everything that we had on earth, that you could touch or it was spiritual, had energy.
Amen.
And,
Joni, what a great way to wrap up this segment. Look forward to catching up with you next week. Our very own Joan Lewis and Joan's Rome on a Wednesday. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. So one of my friends sent a report that is quite interesting. We'll discuss this in 2 cents coming up in the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra, all about how important it is to be creative and to use our gifts for something and don't let those gifts go to waste. Sounds an awful lot like the parable of the talents. And it's utterly amazing how much even doing simple activities can do for our creativity, can do for our mind in terms of our health, spiritual health, emotional health. And this is so scriptural. But they went through several different activities, such as dancing, and they're not talking about becoming, a Broadway dancer or anything. They're talking about just, enjoying dancing, maybe joining a dance studio or something, taking some lessons. They talk about painting. They talk about art. They talk about writing. All these different things, talking about God's gifts today, right? Using the gifts that God gave us for our health, but also for entertainment for other people, to bring other people joy. And this is what we need to think about in terms of how are we spending our time? Are we spending it fruitfully, or are we wasting the gifts that God gave us? I just thought it was interesting. I want to share that with you for 2 cents. And then really looking forward to talking with Lauren Muzyka. We'll end on another very positive note today regarding pro-life information. She's the head of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, and it's their anniversary, 25 years, and they've saved some 25,000 babies in the past. Well, it's 12 years actually for their anniversary. 12 years and 25,000 babies. 25,000. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? God is so good. And so are the folks at Advocates for Life. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra on this Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026, in the third week of Easter. Great to be with you every day for 2 hours, and thanks for tuning into this second hour on a very unique way to listen on our EWTN Radio Extra channel. Coming up today, we are going to talk with an amazing woman who is the CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life. They're celebrating 12-year anniversary for this organization. Thousands upon thousands of babies saved. It's such a good news story. And this is why I'm sharing this, because there's so much negativity out there and so many scary things about abortion, right? It's so evil. It's intrinsically evil. Women don't have the full story. They're not given the proper information to make a choice. Sidewalk counselors are pressured. But through everything, despite all of that, thousands of babies saved. because people have a heart for Christ and a heart for life, and they're making a difference. So this is a real sensitive spot for me because my husband is a sidewalk advocate and has been a counselor for many years, praying outside the abortion mills on infamous 8 Mile in the heart of Detroit, Michigan. So this is something that's so important, and we really need to support these sidewalk advocates, all those who are on the streets really trying to save women and babies and families, and frankly, all of us, because every time there's an abortion, we all suffer. An innocent child loses his or her life. The woman is affected. The family is affected. The spouse is affected. We're all affected because it's murder. Okay? So don't get me started on this, but I love this organization. I just love them. They do so much great work. And Lauren's going to be joining us. She also joins me every year at the March for Life, which is really, really uplifting. All right, so that is a main interview for the second hour of the program. We have 2 segments with Lauren. Very excited about that. 2 Cents, one of my friends this morning sent me this very interesting piece on how important it is to be creative. To do, in addition to your work, right? You're given a certain gift and you have a vocation. And sometimes, obviously we have the vocation of marriage or the religious life. So that could also be your work or your ministry. But this study also talks about making the most of your gifts, even in your spare time. What creativity does for us. And I think it's something interesting and indirectly related in many ways, if you think about it, to Earth Day, right? We're called to protect the creation of God, and the church has many teachings on that and protecting the environment. And how creative are we in looking at the beauty that God's given us, and what are we doing with our creativity? Obviously, the Lord is a creator of all of it, but this great creator of all things gave us particular talents and gifts, and not just to be used during 9 to 5. So we'll talk about that in this neat report that I was gifted this morning. That's the program, 2 Cents, and then Lauren Muzyka will join us, a president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life. Okay. What's happening with the weather? National Weather Service says not much has changed in the last hours since we first gave you the report at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. A Pacific storm system will continue to bring low elevation rain and mountain snow to much of the west through today, with heavy mountain snow expected in the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada. Now, this system will also be bringing strong winds to the Intermountain West, the Rockies, and the Plains, creating critical fire weather conditions for the high plains. So there you have it. That's the weather on a Wednesday morning. It's April 22nd, 2026. And now time for the news here on EWTN Radio Extra. The president says he is extending that ceasefire with Iran. In a Truth Social post, Trump citing the serious fractured Iranian government. The president saying Iran made the request, and he adds the U.S. will hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. Trump saying the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz being conducted by the United States will continue. The current ceasefire was due to expire tomorrow. Vice President J.D. Vance set to travel to Pakistan to meet with Iranian officials, but still at this point it's unclear when or if Vance will depart. Iran cannot get their hands on nuclear weapons. Those words from Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott, who says if Iran gets what they want in nuclear weapons, that country will be able to reach our shores.
I do believe that what Trump is doing is our best shot, and it's our only shot at preserving American life.
Vice President J.D. Vance has been expected again, as we mentioned, to attend a new round of talks in Pakistan to end the war, but late word is that Vance has delayed his trip for more meetings at the White House. This, as there is no word on whether anyone from Iran will show up eventually for those talks in Pakistan. A very busy day for the Holy Father as his African trip draws to a close. He is spending his second day in Equatorial Guinea, where during a speech yesterday he warned humanity's failure is at risk of being what he called tragically compromised. He cited ongoing wars and a breakdown of international law. Today, the Holy Father is celebrating Mass at the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in the province of Mangamo. His agenda also including a flight to the port city of Bata, where he will visit a prison. The Holy Father heading back to Rome tomorrow night. A federal appeals court is upholding a Texas law that requires public schools to display the Ten Commandments. The legislature passing Senate Bill 10 in 2025, mandating every public elementary and secondary classroom post a copy of the commandments. A lawsuit arguing the law violates the First Amendment. In its ruling released yesterday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals saying the law does not violate the amendment because it does not punish anyone who rejects the Ten Commandments, regardless of the reason. The Department of Justice now accusing the Southern Poverty Law Center of funneling money to leaders of hate groups. In a fraud indictment returned yesterday, the DOJ alleging the organization paid millions to those associated with the KKK, the National Socialist Party of America, Aryan Nations Affiliated Motorcycle Club, and other extremist groups.
They're required to, under the laws associated with a nonprofit, to have certain transparency and honesty in what they're telling donors they're going to spend money on and what their mission statement is and what they're raising money doing.
Acting U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche discussing the indictment during a press conference yesterday.
As the indictment describes, the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
Earlier Tuesday, the SPLC announcing it was the subject of a DOJ criminal probe claiming they were paying informants to gather information on extremist groups. President Trump reading an excerpt from the Bible yesterday as part of a national scripture reading. The group Christians Engage asking the president to take part in the America Reads the Bible event.
And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place to myself for a house of sacrifice.
Trump recording his segment from the Oval Office, reading from 2 Chronicles chapter 7.
If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land.
Several past and present Trump administration officials are also taking part in the reading. Tammy Trujillo tells us there's an update now on that mix-up at a fertility clinic that left a Florida couple with the wrong child.
Tiffany Score and her partner Stephen Mills are white, but Tiffany wound up giving birth 2 years ago to a child of a different race after an IVF treatment at the fertility center of Orlando. The couple has announced that the biological parents of that little girl have now been identified. While they say the bond they have with the baby they've named Shay is forever, they admit this development, quote, raises new issues that will have to be resolved. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Voters in Virginia approving a redistricting referendum that could allow Democrats to redraw the state's congressional maps. That measure could give Democrats a 10-1 advantage in the upcoming midterms. Following the results of Tuesday's vote, the former Republican governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, urging the Virginia Supreme Court to step in and rule against what he called an unconstitutional process that will disenfranchise millions of Virginia residents. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is ending the mandatory flu vaccine requirement for service members.
Under President Trump, the War Department continues to take decisive action to once again restore freedom and strength to our joint force. We're seizing this moment to discard any absurd, overreaching mandates that only weaken our warfighting capabilities.
This policy change aligns with the Trump administration's efforts to reverse COVID-19 vaccine mandates and then reinstate service members who were discharged for refusing them. And Philadelphia police say 2 men with assault rifles robbed an armored truck yesterday morning.
Someone just robbed a Brinks truck.
They allegedly stole more than $1 million. Shortly before 9:45 in the morning, police say 2 gunmen jumped out of a parked car, armed with assault rifles, and attacked the truck.
Aaron McLaughlin reporting investigators say they later found the suspected getaway vehicle abandoned under Interstate 95. No arrests have been made, though. There's no description of the suspects and no injuries, thank goodness, are reported. The FBI, meanwhile, taking over the investigation. And after a teen died by suicide following chatbot use, California lawmakers are introducing 2 measures to make chatbots safer for children. Companion chatbots are computer programs that talk with users for fun or emotional support.
This technology is relatively new, but both anecdotal and scholarly evidence continues to show that the impacts of these interactions between chatbots and users, particularly youth, can be extremely dangerous.
That's Senator Alex Padilla, who says researchers have found that high daily usage correlates with loneliness, problematic use, isolation, and lower socialization. Chatbots have also been seen to have addictive properties. The proposed measures would require chatbot companies to review their products each year to find risks to minors and have their safety measures checked by independent auditors. Reports would go to the state attorney general, and public prosecutors could take legal action if companies don't follow the rules. That new legislation, by the way, would also require chatbots to refer children to crisis support if needed and also alert parents as quickly as possible. Lawmakers introducing the changes after a family said a chatbot discouraged their son from talking to his parents and even offered to write him a suicide note. And he died by suicide soon after. You probably spent more in March than you did the month before, but Daria Albinger says most of it went to one place.
Retail sales jumped more than expected last month, with much of the increase going right into people's gas tanks. The Census Bureau, which tabulates the data, shows they rose 1.7% in March, which is more than the 1.4% that analysts were expecting. The jump driven by a 15.5% spike in gasoline spending brought on by the war with Iran. I'm Daria Albinger.
A new study says drinking coffee can lower your risk of dementia. Researchers at Harvard analyzing 43 years of data on over 130,000 people, finding that higher consumption of caffeinated coffee was linked to an 18% lower risk of dementia and better cognitive performance. Similar benefits were found among caffeinated tea drinkers, but not among decaf drinkers. The study suggesting there are benefits related to caffeine, though researchers say it's unclear whether that was the only factor. And Rory O'Neill tells us, just in time for Earth Day, a new poll asking Americans their thought on power production.
Majorities of Americans still support wind and solar energy projects, but that support is down 10 to 15 points in the past decade. Meanwhile, a new Gallup survey finds support for nuclear energy is climbing, with 46% of Americans now saying there should be more emphasis on nuclear power. An increasing number of Americans say we should be moving away from fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. I'm Rory O'Neill.
It is a Wednesday morning. It's April 22nd, 2026. Great to be with you. Coming up in 2 cents, it's some interesting reports on the connection between our creativity and our well-being. And I thought it was so eye-opening that all kinds of different activities, all kinds of different talents that we have can make a difference, and not just in the workplace. We'll explain coming up next. And Lauren Muzyka, who is the president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, much to celebrate after 12 years of saving babies. We'll talk with her for 2 segments this morning. Thanks for listening to our second hour on EWTN Radio Extra. 16 minutes past the hour, second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. We appreciate you, your listenership, and your support. Thank you so much. So one of my friends sent me this report this morning, this interesting comment, I think it was on X, about a Texas psychologist, and you may know who he is, James Pennebaker. And not too long ago, he told 46 students to write about the worst thing that ever happened to them, 15 minutes a day for 4 days straight. Over the next 6 months, those students went to the doctor half as often as the children in the control group. Again, the psychologist was James Pennebaker. He repeated the experiment, and so did other labs. Same answer every time. Writing about pain in a notebook was changing something inside the body. Follow-up studies found improved immune cell counts, faster wound healing after surgery, lower HIV virus levels in blood tests, and better lung function in people with asthma. For years, the mechanism was a puzzle. The psychologist had stumbled onto a much bigger pattern than he realized. Making things of any kind, whether it be writing or something else, does something to the body. All right, now here we go. And this is what I love, because everyone says that science is separate from, religion, and you can't bring the two together, that they're opposite. No, science is finally catching up with who we are, made in the image and likeness of God. Everything backs it up. It's called the natural law. It's also called common sense. But anyway, take a listen to this. So you heard about the writing part and how that was therapeutic. Now we have painting. A 2016 study at Drexel University handed 39 random adults some markers, clay, and collage paper and told them to make whatever they wanted for 45 minutes. No rules, no skill required. 75% of them walked out with lower cortisol, the main stress hormone, in their saliva. Beginners and experienced artists got the same drop. All right, let's move on to the topic of dancing. Doctors at Einstein College of Medicine tracking 469 seniors over a 21-year period in a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2003. People who danced a few times a week were 76% less likely to get dementia than people who rarely did. That was the largest protective effect of anything they tested. Crosswords came in at 47%, reading at 35%, swimming and cycling did nothing for the brain at all. And how about singing? In 2004, researchers in Germany measured antibodies in acquired saliva before and after rehearsal. The antibody count, the stuff that fights off colds and flus, rose significantly. A follow-up study on cancer patients and their caregivers found that 1 hour of group singing, 1 hour. So like if you're in the choir and you go and you practice, right, every week like my father used to do. And what do they say about singing and performing? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And the practice does you good. 1 hour of group singing, dropping cortisol, and switched on their immune systems at measurable blood test level. And just going to see art helps. It's amazing. University College London tracking over 6,000 British adults over the age of 50 for 14 years. People who went to the theater, a museum, or a concert every few months were 31% less likely to die during that window. Even going once or twice a year dropped the risk by 14%. Wealth, education, and starting health were all accounted for. The mechanism seems to live in a brain circuit called the default mode network, the part that wanders when you daydream. When you fall into that zone of making something, that network hooks up with the one that holds your attention, and the brain's stress system quiets down. Cortisol falls, dopamine climbs, and the slow burn inflammation that eventually kills most of us calms down too. None of it depends on the quality of what you make. Isn't that amazing? So what is this telling us about who we are, made in the image and likeness of God? And today is Earth Day. So I would say the connection is that we need to get out, do something, right? Do something or even nothing at all, la dolce far niente, which is kind of what these people are doing, the art of doing nothing, the sweetness of doing nothing. They're dancing, they're singing, they're creating art. They're not artists, they're not even studying art. They're going to see art. They're getting away from their daily routine. And in some ways, even using the talents that they have, whether they are singers or dancers. But the whole idea is to don't stay closed up in yourself. We're seeing so much, and I just read that story, right, in the news about chatbots and the problems that they're causing because it's causing more isolation and depression. We need to get out there, and we need to enjoy God's green earth, and we need to enjoy each other. This is science, but it's not exactly rocket science, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think especially when you start with the writing, my spiritual director always tells me, write something down, write a letter to a person with whom you're having an issue. Don't send it, but just get it out of your system. Pray while you're doing it, write the letter, and then send it off. And especially for me as a writer, that does really help. But 46 students sitting down to write about the worst thing that ever happened to them. And over 6 months, they went to the doctor half as often as the children in the control group. I think what we have to understand is how God made us. My friend Kelly Walquist always talked about this. We're created to relate. We are called to relate first to God, then to each other. And so these different activities enable us to relate more fruitfully, I think. And first of all, I love to dance. Took some dance in college. It was actually my second career choice, but I wasn't tall enough to be a rockette, and I love journalism more. So, I technically quit the dance, even though I dance around the house all the time. Those little things, and those things that bring us joy. St. Teresa of Avila used to say, Lord, preserve us from sour-faced saints. I have an icon of St. Teresa of Avila in my office. It was given by a friend of mine a couple of years ago, and she's playing the tambourine. She loved to dance. She was not a sour-faced saint. She was a joy-filled saint. And it spread and it was contagious. And look at how she changed the world. But again, these are simple things. Sometimes, as I said over the weekend when I was speaking to the ladies, we make it so complicated. We have to get away from ourselves and go out and meet other people, be with other people. They see the same results when you talk about socializing in other ways. Going to church every week, volunteering. I did a whole chapter on this and these statistics. It's fascinating what these statistics show, in addition to what I'm reading to you this morning. I have a chapter on this in my book, God's Bucket List. And what it does for you physically, emotionally, spiritually. Being creative. And again, you don't have to be an expert on it, but you should if you have those talents. What are you doing with them? The Bible encourages believers to use their God-given gifts and talents to serve others and glorify God. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, it says in Romans 12:6, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. It highlights the diversity of our gifts and the importance of exercising them faithfully. But to each one of us, it says in Ephesians 4:7, a grace has been given as Christ appointed it. That verse, by the way, in Ephesians 4:7, underscoring that every one of us has unique gifts for God's plan. And sometimes those gifts are very simple, but really important. Like if you have a natural rhythm and you like to dance as much as I do. I could be seen dance, and people get a big kick out of me. Wherever I am, if I hear music, I just naturally start to move. I don't know what it is. My father says when I was sitting on his lap one time, I was about 6 months old, and some music was playing in the background, and my head was going back and forth in time with the music. It brings me joy. It gets me out of myself. Now, I'm not talking about dancing on a tabletop with a lampshade on my head, of course, but be joyful and to do something, again, to get outside of yourself. And what a great thing to think about on this Earth Day. Be joyful, as so many of our saints did when they were here, when they walked God's green earth. Get out there, enjoy it. It's Earth Day after all. Go ride your bike, go dance, go walk in the woods. Thank God for everything He's created, especially us. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a beautiful Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026. Great to catch up with Lauren Muzyka. I was just telling her, seems like it was only yesterday, as an old saying goes, that we were talking at the March for Life, and here it is the end of April. Lauren is the president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, an amazing organization. They're celebrating 12 years. Hey, girl, how are you?
I'm good, Teresa. Good to be back with you.
Always great to talk to you, and great to talk to you when we're not standing out in the cold, although this year wasn't too bad. Actually, the weather was okay. I was happy. From northern, the United States, are 45 degrees. It was like nice. I can't believe 12 years for you. Congratulations. Tell us about that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard to believe. 12 years. So I'm the founder. It makes me feel very old, right? But I mean, goodness, we have just seen the miraculous over the last 12 years. Nearly 26,000 babies saved. I mean, really simply because people like you and me just decided to say yes to this, right? Mm-hmm. And they went to their darkest place, the darkest place in their local community, and offered those loving, life-affirming alternatives to women and men entering the abortion facility. We're also celebrating 110 eternal souls who have left the abortion business with the help and witness of a Sidewalk Advocate. And then I tell people it's a great business plan against the abortion industry. You help enough women, you're eliminating demand. You help enough workers, you're eliminating supply. And it is shutting abortion businesses. And so we're celebrating now 71 facility closures. So to God the glory for that. He has done great things and continues to do great things.
But 26,000 babies, Lauren? That's amazing.
Yeah. It's hard to get your mind around. And, one of the things that we did when we formed this organization, we said we're going to diligently, we're going to have a high standard for those statistics. And so these are women that actually accepted a referral to the local life-affirming pregnancy resource center. They abandoned their abortion appointment, or they otherwise let us know that they were choosing life. We even keep track of something called hopeful saves, and those are women who left to think about it, often armed with life-saving literature and a referral to the pregnancy center. So we're celebrating nearly 7,000 of those. But we're now at about 230 teams across the United States, Puerto Rico, Mexico City, and Colombia. And I just marvel every day at what God has done because, again, these are just salt-of-the-earth folks in our local communities, right? Right to Life groups, churches, random groups of volunteers, the faithful who have said yes. And what we provide is training, tools, and support, and we are there to serve them for the long haul until their abortion facility closes. And quite often, when they celebrate a closure, they say, on to the next one, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing to mention, too, is, even here in post-Roe America, where we have a good number of states that protect life at conception, we still have abortion referral centers on the ground. And so our program even works there where, we establish a presence and we catch women before they've made that investment of time, energy, and money to go across state lines. And so we still have a presence in Texas, Tennessee, and other states where abortion is illegal because we know that women are still leaving those states, those counties, the next nearest abortion facility, or otherwise are considering mail order abortion causing drugs, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, trying to get our minds around the numbers of babies that you've saved, 26,000 in 12 years. We just don't know what God has in store for each of those precious lives and how they could be. Of course, every person changes the world in his or her own way, but that's phenomenal, the number.
Yeah. I mean, when you consider it, every life saved, you're not just saving a life, you're saving a family, and then you're saving generations, right? Like I sometimes stop to consider that as well, that there's a ripple effect. And then there's so much more going on than we can even see. Like one of the latest stories we just posted on our blog, there was a mom who 2.5 years ago was on the sidewalk and she encountered a sidewalk advocate named Sarah in Cincinnati, Ohio. And this mom chose life and then kept in touch with the Cincinnati team. Well, she recently texted Sarah and said, "Are you guys still on the sidewalk?" And she said, "Absolutely." And she said, "Well, I would like to be a sidewalk advocate." And so she just came out to the sidewalk. And at the time that she came out, how providential is this? They were talking to a mom considering abortion. And this mom stepped in and said, "I was where you were 2.5 years ago, and I want you to meet my daughter, Eve." And so these are things that I know Lauren Muzyka could have never orchestrated or done. I just, I think so much of our journey here is just saying yes to the next right thing. Mm-hmm. And then again, when we show up, God shows off, right?
Yeah. And
so many of these stories, and that's not the first time that has happened. We've even had former abortion workers who have come back to our groups and said, "You know what? I want to do this now because you completely transformed my life." And so again, God is in the business of transformation, and we just have to keep saying yes.
Well, I was reading, I'm on your website, by the way. It's so beautiful, sidewalkadvocates.org, and then you just go to Stories from the Sidewalk, and you have this posted very recently, the story you just shared, All in God's Time, from April 17th of this year. And her timing, being there at that moment when that woman, was about to go in and, God forbid, take the life of her unborn child. I mean, you just look back and you think, this is a question I have for the Lord. It's like, okay, how do you do I know you're God and everything, but how do you do all of this everywhere at the same time? I just have this question. How does it work? I had this experience, Lauren, last weekend. I spoke in Colorado for a women's conference, and I did a whole talk on La Dolce Fede, the sweet life of faith, what Italians can teach us about living a godly life. And I talked about the importance of something that the Italians do every single day, la passeggiata, which means they take a walk. And they do this because not only is it's not like exercise. It's just they go and they walk around, they meet people, they talk. It's a socialization effort for them. It's a communication effort for them. It's connecting with the people. And so then I go to 4:00 Mass after the conference. And the wonderful priest of this parish in Colorado gets up to do the homily. I'm sitting with one of the team members from the conference. And the first words out of his mouth were, sometimes you just got to take a walk. And we,
I love it.
And we looked at each other and we said, did he just say that? Because his whole emphasis was what I was talking about in my presentation. So God affirms things for you, right?
Yeah. No, it's so true. And, one of the people that I met at the Heartbeat International Conference, this beautiful pregnancy center conference, Heartbeat International is one of the largest pregnancy center systems in the country, in the world, and we had a table there. And one of our sidewalk advocates was present from California, and he walked up to me and he said, Lauren, I just want you to know that this is so much more than just telling women not to have an abortion. This has been transformative for my spiritual life, you know? My wife and I go to the sidewalk every Monday morning, and it's the best part of our week. It's the hardest part of our week. But so many people are telling us that, you know, in a sense, just like you said, the spiritual walk that they have been a part of, Sidewalk Advocacy is like holding up a mirror to yourself. It's a refiner's fire. We have to examine ourselves inevitably when we're out on the sidewalk serving other people and really considering what we believe about God and what is possible, right? And then the privilege of helping these precious women and families who are in a valley of decision, because this is, you know, when someone arrives at an abortion facility, it's never just, hey, I think I'll have an abortion today.
Right.
It's always tied to something so much bigger and greater and deeper. And we have this opportunity to stand in the gap and speak words of peace and hope into their lives. And again, knowing, just like you've alluded to, that this is not just saving that life that day, but a family, saving generations. I mean, what an amazing opportunity. There's nothing like it on earth, you know?
Well, just think about it's that immediate family. Of course, the child, the mother, the father, that family, circle of family and friends. But every time we take the life of a child, or any time any murder is committed, we're all losing something, and that impacts us. You're not going to have peace, as Mother Angelica said it too, but Mother Teresa, remember at that prayer breakfast so many years ago, you want peace? Stop allowing abortion. Right? Stop killing babies.
Right, yeah. And there's even just this beautiful work of healing that's going on, too. You know, we partner with all these great healing groups. We know that about 1 in 4 women before the age of 45 have had an abortion.
Lauren, hang on. We have to take a break, sweetie. You know the routine. We'll be right back. More with the fabulous Lauren Muzyka, celebrating 12 years of this amazing organization, Sidewalk Advocates for Life. We'll be right back. Having a dynamic conversation with Lauren Muzyka from Sidewalk Advocates for Life. Just an amazing celebration. Thanks be to God for this group of people that do so much good every single day, celebrating 12 years. So, Lauren, take us back. How did this all start?
Yeah, well, I still remember being, this is a little bit back now, but a college student at Texas A&M University. I remember this beautiful woman walking into the end of daily mass, and she invited us to go out and pray in front of the new Planned Parenthood abortion facility that had gone up a year before in Aggie Land. And I thought to myself, I could go out and pray 1 hour a week and, you know, provide witness to what's going on inside this building. And then some of us got invited to become sidewalk counselors, brought in beautiful Baptist woman from Georgia, Karen Black Mercer. She trained a bunch of us. And I was just hooked. I just saw the opportunity to reach out to these women. Some of you may find that familiar. This is actually where former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson was. And so I actually watched Abby Johnson start out as an abortion center escort and rise through the ranks of Planned Parenthood and eventually become the center's director. And then something came into Aggieland, a beautiful prayer effort called 40 Days for Life that many people are familiar with. That started in Aggieland, this 40-day prayer vigil in front of the abortion facility, and began to spread across the United States. So anyways, I didn't get the clue that maybe I was called to grassroots pro-life work. I actually went to Ave Maria School of Law thinking I was going to be a pro-life litigator or a lobbyist, and still in the culture battle. But meanwhile, 40 Days for Life was spreading across the United States. Well, at one point, providentially, my old friend David B. Wright, the founder of 40 Days for Life that took it national and, of course, now an international movement of prayer, he invited me to join the 40 Days for Life national team. And so I joined them for over 2 years as their campaign strategist. And while I was there, just really saw a need and felt the call to start a streamlined sidewalk counseling program that, just as 40 Days for Life had provided this for prayer volunteers, could we do the same thing for people who wanted to reach out with their words? And David had let me know up front, you know what, I don't feel called to this. I feel like we're supposed to make this prayer vigil as strong as it can be. If you feel called to this, you're going to have to do this outside of 40 Days for Life. And so that was a tearful parting of the ways. You know, he blessed that, and you know, here we are 12 years later. And so learned so much. I mean, I had even been on the streets, you know, before law school and after law school as a staff sidewalk counselor with the Dallas Diocese. And so, you know, this thing that I did on the side, this hobby, just eventually became my life's work because I realized, you know what, there's smarter people than me can handle the law, but, you know, really a blank check to do good on the sidewalk. And so anyways, it just is amazing to look back that it really just starts with a simple yes. You know, I went out just because I thought I can just be there and be a witness and pray. And I all the fruit that I saw coming from, the faithful going out to the sidewalk and just giving someone a lifeline, a simple piece of literature, letting them know about their options and resources, seeing 40 Days for Life and the fruit that it bore because people went to just go pray, even though we know that's the foundation and the most important thing and the foundation of what we do as well. And so I've always been the hands and the feet, right? Get out there, being a mover and shaker. But, we've had people from all walks of life join us, busy moms and dads, businessmen, businesswomen, people of all ages, people of all different personality types. I've seen introverts be just as good at this as extroverts, right? Sometimes we can stereotype or say, oh, I'm not like Lauren. I can't just walk up to someone on the sidewalk and start a conversation. But I tell people, if you can hold a conversation with a human being and you've got real help, you can be successful at doing this if you're called.
Well, my husband, you've met him several times. He's an introvert. I know it's a shock. I'm the extrovert in the couple, but no, but he is. He's an introvert, and he's been out there on the sidewalk counselor for years.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think sometimes we can pigeonhole ourselves, right? One of the women that comes to mind, we have a sidewalk advocate in Louisiana, and they said that she was the quietest woman in the group, and she really felt called to this. And it was even her husband that turned to our local leader and said, I have just seen a blossoming in her, right? And I actually got to watch her on the sidewalk. A lot of times when we go to support our groups, we get around the country, and I've got an amazing team, the programs team. We visit our locations across the country, troubleshooting challenges or having a meal with them or just supporting them. And so a lot of times when we go out to the sidewalk, we say, well, how can I best serve you this morning? And sometimes that's us standing back and just strategically looking at a site. I got to actually see this woman in action, and I was just in awe, She had just such a gentle way about her, and it was like a magnet. People went to go talk to her because she was just so inviting, and you wanted to be around her, right? And so really the greatest attribute, so to speak, that we can espouse on the sidewalk is love. Because love is, it undergirds every virtue. And St. Paul tells us it's the greatest. And without love, people won't know that we care. And these women have to know that we care.
A gong booming or a
them.
cymbal clashing, right? That's it. That beautiful letter
right.
from St. Paul in Corinthians.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the homepage of the beautiful ministry, Sidewalk Advocates for Life. It's sidewalkadvocates.org. And it says, join the movement that has helped save 25,796 mothers and babies from abortion. Lauren, I still can't wrap my head around that number.
Yeah,
that is so amazing.
Well, and I tell people it is just amazing because Lisa in our programs team, she's the one that gathers all the statistics from our team. And every 2 weeks, I get a report on my desk. And this latest one was 66 babies saved. The one before that was 85. A lot of times we're just as excited when we hear about an abortion worker leaving, because when we're not ministering to the women going in, then we're reaching out to the workers and referring them, again, to former Planned Parenthood Director Abby Johnson's abortion worker ministry. So to hear that, soul number 110 had just left in New York, some of those are even just as exciting because we know that that's an eternal soul that has turned away and now has a relationship with Christ and is pursuing healing, And so really, it's so multifaceted, this ministry. And again, what a privilege to be a part of it.
And I'm wondering, and there, obviously, the secret is prayer and our relationship with the Lord and, of course, embracing very strongly the beautiful teachings on life. But if you would say there's a few, insider tips you would give people who are thinking and praying about doing this, what would you say?
Yeah. I would say the top one is recognizing that you are not counseling the baby, you're reaching out to a mother in crisis. That for me was a big key that, when I first went out to the sidewalk, I almost felt like I had to come out with a life before birth catalog and prove to her kind of from that left brain logical approach that, again, this was a baby and so therefore we shouldn't take its life, right? But what I found very quickly, and this is what the research supports through the Vitae Foundation and all their great research, that women are in right brain emotional mode. They're in crisis.
Right.
And so you've got to start where they are. Just like where Christ has met us in our great need, we run to where she is. And so it's understanding that when you're in crisis or self-preservation mode, that, you've kind of got everything inverted. She's thinking, I got to get out of this situation. She's pushing baby and God to the recesses of her mind. And so we run to where she is and use language that she can understand. And so, now when I go to the sidewalk, I say, we care about you. We've got real help for you today. It's like the Vitae Foundation says, start with her, talk about her first. And then that ends up being the key that unlocks the rest of the conversation. Then we can bring in baby, then we can bring in God, because people have to know that you care. And I think the other thing, too, is that because of what the media has painted largely, there are all these myths about who sidewalk people are.
Right.
She expects that you're going to be yelling or judgmental or ugly to her on the sidewalk. And then when we invert all of that, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I want to be around these people. My favorite question on the sidewalk when we're walking a woman over to the pregnancy center is, oh, by the way, where are the protesters they told me about? Because we've completely thwarted that idea for her. And to be fair, there's a proper time and place for protesting. Don't hear what I'm not saying, but I know that when we go out to the sidewalk, it really is just a work of mercy. It's connecting with a hurting human being. And when you understand that, then all of a sudden everything shifts, right? I think the other thing, too, is making sure that you've got a referral, that you've got real resources. Because
I was just going to say that. What about resources? Because that's super important, right?
Right. It's not enough to tell someone, don't do this. There's a concept in the psychology of influence called commitment and consistency. She has seen the abortion facility, the abortion industry, as a solution to her crisis, to her problem. And so it's not enough to tell someone, well, don't do this. Well, she's already made a commitment. She sees this as the savior to her situation. If instead we go in and we say, hey, this is a new commitment that you can make, that, this is the real solution, that abortion really won't get you that freedom and that hope and that peace that you long for, right? Then all of a sudden we're in a different conversation. Yeah. And so that's really where, everything changed for me. You got to start with mom. You've got to speak to her situation and make sure that you have a place to take her, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure many women who go, because of the way the media report about the sidewalk counselors, they think that the person is going to judge them, say they're going to hell. That's not, we have to meet people where they are, and that's what Jesus did so well. Looking at the woman at the well, right? He knew her background. He knew who she was. She's having a conversation with him in the middle of the day when men barely spoke to women in public, especially rabbis. And there he is having a conversation, and he knew all about her, and he just loved her and spoke to her. And I think we forget that. We make it so complicated sometimes, right?
That's right. The crazy that we're seeing on the sidewalk these days, so to speak, really is coming from the other side. The abortion facility, the industry, they train these folks called abortion center escorts. And these folks are trained often to throw us off our game, to interfere with our conversations. We've even had gift bags with resources knocked out of our hands. And that's probably the top issue that we troubleshoot through our programs team. On our national team, we've got a regional programs manager that oversees a region of the United States and ministers to those leaders who then in turn minister to the Sidewalk Advocates. But this is the top issue that we're dealing with on the sidewalk. It's, yes, we still have, other folks that come out to the sidewalk that are of goodwill and are pro-life, but sometimes maybe doing something that's a little distracting or not helpful. But really the top issue that we're troubleshooting is, we've got these abortion center escorts banging cowbells in our ears or cussing us out or yelling at us while we're trying to talk to a woman. And I mean, you can feel the spiritual battle a lot of times on the sidewalk.
Yeah, Dominic talks about that all the time. Yep.
Yeah. I often say that the sidewalk is a microcosm of the culture, right? I mean, even when we had the leak at the Supreme Court and the overturning of Roe, we saw an increase in tension on the sidewalk. And so, this is probably the hardest part of our job is the enemy does not like what we're doing, and they're working through the abortion workers that, are out there. And of course, yes, we set boundaries. We call the police when our person or property is threatened, but we also love them, and we also hope to win them over as well. And so, again, we're winning some of these escorts off the sidewalk. Some of these abortion facilities are even telling them not to talk to us. They tell the workers not to talk to us because so many of them have been won out of the industry through a sidewalk advocate, a sidewalk counselor, Abby Johnson's abortion worker ministry and beyond. And so love is effective.
Truth be known, all those people that have left, they probably have such a desire to talk to you because they hear about these other stories and deep down they may want to leave. Have about a minute left. What would you say to someone who's thinking and praying about going into sidewalk counseling? What would you tell them to do? Obviously your website has a ton of information, right?
Yeah, well, a wise person once told me that proper discernment is information, right? So just start with looking at the website, sidewalkadvocates.org. We say that, you can start or join. So you can go to our locations tab and see if there's a location near you. You can go to a training, one of our local trainings, and just see, is this for me? But if you have that tug on your heart, then I say give it a try. I mean, even if you tried our program, you're not beholden to us forever. We have a renewal program. So, after so long with our program, we'll come back to you and see if you feel called to renew. We have a high renewal rate. It's in the, about 90% area. But again, so much of this is just saying yes to the next right thing. There's no perfect sidewalk advocate, and God is going to use your unique gifts and talents. And I will tell you, this is the best thing that I've ever said yes to besides my marriage. This is such a transformative experience. There's nothing like seeing a life saved and a family transformed. There's nothing like it.
Way to wrap up the program, my dear. Thank you so much, and congratulations. A beautiful ministry, Sidewalk Advocates. Check out their beautiful website, sidewalkadvocates.org. We'll be right back. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in to both hours of Catholic Connection. You are listening this hour on EWTN Radio Extra. Maybe you listen to the entire program on this app. It's a great new way to listen. Check it out. If you have any questions, just go to our website, EWTN.com, and do a search. You can share that with folks and tell them how to download it and all that good stuff. All right, tomorrow, amazing lineup that we have for you. We have a full 45 minutes after the news and weather, of course, which we always give you every day, with a specialist who studied the shroud. I don't know if you remember, we did that interview with Dr. Lavoie. He's written a book on the shroud, and he is using his talents as an investigator, as someone who knows all about forensics, to share with us all the information on the shroud. So we sat down with him and did an extra interview. He was on live, I think, probably about, I think it was kind of in the middle of Lent, but he has a book out from Sophia Press that came out 3 years ago all about the shroud. Anyhow, so we sat him down, did 3 very, very eye-opening and interesting and phenomenal segments. Not talking about myself, I'm talking about him and the information he gave us. But if that's not enough, wait, there's more. We have in the second hour of the program tomorrow, we're going to re-air that interview we did with Father Robert Spitzer. If you remember, he was in town a few weeks ago. He was at Irondale, our headquarters for EWTN, sitting down, of course, with Father Mitch and Doug Keck for Father Spitzer's Universe, and live with Father Mitch on Wednesdays, talking about the new interactive museum in Orange County, the Diocese of Orange, actually, on the shroud. He's an expert as well. Great lineup tomorrow. Hope you can join us. Ciao, ciao.